Hello, welcome to Venture Capital with me, Katie Pilbeam. Today we're going to be discussing Greece because Greek people who have been avoiding paying their tax will no longer be able to hide. Now, the state is getting tough on tax evaders and will now have access to their personal bank accounts. Now, we question if this is the right way forward for the country or even if it's morally right in the first place. Now, today as well, big day for Ireland because the country will cut the international bailout chains. The country will now finance itself independently. The question is it ready? Plus, Ruble gets a sign, JP Morgan goes virtual, and Sean Thomas gives his last ever in-house trading technique. So I'm going to be a little bit sad. But first of all, let's get stuck in and talk about Greece, because as I was saying, the Greek authorities will now have the power to tap into people's bank accounts that haven't been paying money that they owe to the state. Now, tough action has already been taken against people that have been avoiding their tax bills. We've already had 2,000 arrests made over debts which they owe to the state. And as a consequence, the state has managed to gather over 9 million euros to state coffers. So is Greece right to clamp down on people that aren't paying their way, or is this just a step too far? Well, we're going to ask Dr. Nick Skrekas. He's an author, economist and international lawyer. He's joining me from Athens just now. Hi, Nick. So first of all, what do you make of this move?
Well, it's a little bit of a desperate measure for desperate times, and it will hit the desperately poor people hardest. This has been a measure that the Troika has advocated, the Troika of backstopping lenders, of course, since 2010. And they've finally gotten their way. When push comes to shove, the lenders usually get their way. We all know that in Greece, 1/3 of the people live under the poverty line. So the idea that you can squeeze blood from a stone is quite silly. I think it's going to be a very regressive measure. It'll probably hit the small nest eggs of the small fry, and the big fish that are very sophisticated and owe millions in back taxes are going to get away scot-free.
There is an argument, Nick, in all of this that Greek people are notorious for avoiding paying tax. Is that unfair to say?
No, it's not unfair to say. I mean, there is a reasoning behind it. The Greek health system, education system, infrastructure and pensions are just a disaster. So Greek people certainly don't like to pay taxes because they don't see value for their money. At the moment, there is about 63 billion euro in back taxes owed. Now, this is in an economy of about 200 billion euro and a country with a national debt of 330 billion euro. Of course, out of the 63 billion, 40 billion is owed by bankrupt companies. So it's going to have to be written off. What they're trying to do is access some of the money of the 23 billion left over. But of course, I doubt they're really going to collect very much at all. This policy idea, in fact, is that it assumes that everyone is trying to rot the system. The reality is it's only a small minority that are doing that, but they're going to be clobbering millions of people across the head.
OK, Nick, a long way ahead, a rocky road, no doubt. Nick Skrekas there talking to us from Athens. Thank you very much indeed for your time today. So Greece is on the way out of recession, apparently, and we've also got Ireland. We've got some positive news because today the country will officially break away from international funding. Now, the country will no longer be dependent on its 85 billion euro bailout. It's had that for 3 years now. And just this week, Bank of America Merrill Lynch's economic outlook for 2014. In it, they said that Ireland, along with Germany, are the only Eurozone countries likely to see a significant, in their words, pickup next year in growth. Now, the bank said that Ireland's economy would grow 1.9% next year, more than twice its projection for the Eurozone and just ahead of Germany as well. So let's dive into detail on this. We always get the reality from Mr. Ivor Crotty, our news editor from the newsroom. Hello, nice to have you in here. And listen, tell me, last time we chatted about this, we said that the numbers all look very rosy and wonderful and very pretty, but the reality is quite different.
Sure, yeah, you got to look behind the top line. If you look at the property market right now, I think you're seeing a greater relative inequality. Rents are being pushed upwards. Salaries are still remaining very low. Obviously, there's been loads of cuts. So people are suffering. People are suffering right across the board. Healthcare is probably the most inefficient healthcare system in Europe. And on top of that, you've got very slow job creation.
Got you. And it's all about jobs at the end of the day. We know that. That's how people survive. And
So the quality of life issues are there,
Yeah.
or the problems are really there, and you don't see that in the top line numbers.
Gotcha. We just see the pretty numbers. Listen, Ireland still has the euro.
Yeah.
What does that mean? How closely does Ireland have to watch the likes of Portugal, Spain, Greece? If they go down, Ireland's going to be in trouble as well.
They're watching the euro very carefully. They're very, very tightly managed by the European Commission, for example, and the Troika is still there. They still have a very strong influence on what Ireland can do. There was a warning that was issued from Brussels last week when a draft budget was revealed from Dublin, and European Commission wanted Ireland to increase the cuts. 2 billion in cuts were being made. European Commission is looking for 2.5 billion because they want to keep it on target.
Right.
Yeah. So they're still imposing cuts,
to...
more austerity, more cuts, and more social unhappiness, basically, for the
more
Irish.
heartache for the average Irishman, pretty much.
It's not something you see.
So the general view, the positive view that Ireland is a poster boy for Europe is nonsense, or is there some kind of truth in that?
I think on the one hand, yes, Ireland has had to take, the Irish people have taken an extraordinary amount of pain, probably too much pain, in my opinion. That's also the opinion, for example, of Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, who thinks, who thinks that the Irish people were made to bear an unfair burden by the austerity policies that were foisted upon them, and the decision to let the financial terrorists get away with 130 billion in a bad bet. So I think the situation in Ireland is not something that's going to change very quickly. I think we're looking at a lost decade in Ireland, and I think as long as issues like immigration are running rampant, I think you're going to see a very, very slow recovery for a country that's taken a battering from the world economy.
Got you. Ivor Crotty, RT's news editor, who's now going to do an Irish dance.
Here we go.
There we are. Thank you. See you next time.
Cheers, Katie.
Very much. And while the global economy struggles with excessive debt, Russia is playing the hero, so it seems, by writing off debt that is owed to various countries around the world. Now, this week, a deal to write off 90% of Cuba's $32 billion debt owed to Russia was signed. Cuba's economy has been crippled by the 50-year trade embargo by the US, which has been called a barbaric genocide by the country's foreign minister. But it's not just Cuba that Russia is going soft on. Over the last 12 years, Russia has forgiven a total of $116 billion of debt. So what other countries are being told to put their money back in their coffers then? Well, let's have a look. Well, the whole of Africa has been let off paying back the second biggest amount, which is over $20 billion. Then it's Afghanistan, which will no longer have to pay back the $12 billion. Then it's Iraq, which will get to keep that $11.9 billion. And then we're going to have a look. We've got Mongolia there with $11 billion in total. And North Korea, snap, $11 billion. They're going to keep hold of that as well. Charitable Russia at the moment. All right, let's move on. Now, let's get all corporate. We're going to talk about Russian Post because Christmas is around the corner and apparently the situation is getting better because it is notoriously bad. So, Post of Russia says it will deliver 50% more parcels between now and New Year's Eve than in the same period last year. The company promises there'll be no repeat of the mountains of parcels that turned up at Moscow's airports in April. So it sounds like Santa will be on time this year. Well, let's hope so. And Russian telecoms giant Rostelecom is preparing to slash jobs, with the Moscow office reportedly set to lose half of its 155,000 staff. The main reason for the layoffs is the company's merger with mobile provider Tele2. And Russia's equivalent to social network Facebook, Kontakty, is to start offering a subscription movie service. The site will collaborate with Media, which owns the rights in Russia to HBO shows Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad. Now, I'm going to get a little bit emotional now because we're going to get to the business desk with Mr. Sean Thomas for the last time ever. Sean, come on, tell me how you've been getting on. I'm not going to be asking you this ever again, so go for it.
Well, I'd like to tell you that I had great news, but unfortunately, if you remember, I was in financials. Sberbank down 1% this week, meaning that I lost $124, bringing my grand total to $12,337 for my final portfolio. You know, I wish I could have great news, but unfortunately, I lost on my last round.
Okay, I'm not a mathematician, but that means you're up for the year. Tell us about the experience. You know Mummy Pilbeam, she loves you. It's her favourite part of the show. So tell me about your experience. How have you found the whole thing?
Well, tell Mummy Pilbeam that I said thank you very much, and I'm sure that you're her favourite part of the show. Okay, 5 months, up 23%. That's actually really good, considering this is very difficult. People should not invest week to week in chasing trends. They should actually do a more long-term strategy and leave it to the professionals and do the long-term type investing. But what we did was we started off with metals in August at $10,000, took a huge hit, ended the month at $7,631. Then slowly, progressively, each month got better and better. September, $9,463. October, up $9,930. November, for the first time, we ended above that 10,000 mark at $10,992. That's when you got your plane tickets to Sochi on the budget airline, of course. And then December, $12,337, a percentage increase of 23%, which is good overall, but a very, very tricky and dangerous strategy.
Listen, thanks ever so much for getting involved with us, Sean. We really appreciate it.
Well,
and you've been fantastic. Mr. Sean Thomas, our in-house investor for 2013. Now, as you just heard, Sean managed to make the majority of his gains during the Bitcoin boom when the virtual currency reached the 1,000 mark. Now, at this point, the world of global finance started to take note. And now, US banking giant JP Morgan is planning to launch their very own virtual cash system. Now, much like Bitcoin, this new electronic system will allow users to make payments completely anonymously, and users would not have the expense of today's wiring fees. That's what the bank says anyway. But you know what? The reality is the world has already gone virtual, with more than 90% of all finance transactions taking place over the internet. Let's have a look at how Bitcoin did perform this year then, because it's been a very interesting one, and we'll be able to see that the price has actually trebled since October here. And we've got these two booms going on just there when the world took note of the Bitcoin. Now, moving on. An official symbol for the Russian currency, the ruble, has finally been approved by the central bank. Now we're going to have a look at the winner, and it won out of 1,000 options. Here we go. Ta-da! So this is actually a Russian R, and it looks like a P to foreigners like me who are more familiar with the Latin alphabet. But we must remember it's definitely not the pooble, it is the ruble. And this is a sign, quite literally, that the government is hoping the ruble will have more of an international status and potential reserve currency as well. That's the idea behind it. All right, guys, that is the Russian alphabet lesson over and done with for today. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been fun, it's been informative, it's been a little bit emotional as well. But next week, we're going to go all festive and Christmassy, so join me then.